Hello, welcome to Ashes Question Time with me, Simon Hughes.
And I'm Simon Mann.
We're in the Brisbane Botanical Gardens, a lovely tranquil setting, the calm after the storm. There was a big storm last night actually in Brisbane. If England had just batted on a little bit more, then the play would have been washed out at about 8 o'clock. But obviously today is a beautiful day, so the fifth day would have taken place. So probably not much point in thinking about what might have happened. England were hammered, and we're going to think about that. What we're also going to do is consider some of your questions and observations that you've given to us on YouTube. Thank you for all your comments. There have been lots of them, some quite vehement, others actually really positive and constructive. So we'll take a sort of cross-section of them. You got one.
I'm going to start with one from Dan. He said, Simon Mann looks like he's about to burst into tears. I can assure you, Dan, I've been watching this a very long time and I've seen it all before. And the only reason that I would burst into tears is it your lateness or lack of punctuality. So there we go. That's that one dealt with. Mike Skinner.
I'm sorry, I can only say I'm sorry, but thank you for turning up on time today again. You're such a willing co-host.
That's nice to get the apology, Oz. Thank you very much indeed. It's Mike Skinner. He says, crap planning. 4 years they have planned for this tour. They should all be sacked. Well, they haven't been planning for 4 years for this tour. They've been planning since the end of the India tour. That's when they reset. It's when they asked Jimmy Anderson to step aside and kind of refashion things. But a lot of planning's gone into this tour. They're 2-0 down. Look, they haven't lost the Ashes yet. I mean, they almost certainly will, you feel, from here. What about this issue of Ashes series being a watershed? You know, whenever England lose another series, not much happens. If they lose the Ashes, it's like, get rid of them all. And actually last time, of course, they did pretty much get rid of them all, didn't they? They got rid of the director of cricket, they got rid of the coach, and eventually Joe Root, the captain, went as well when they lost in the West Indies 3 months later after losing the Ashes. I mean, are jobs on the line?
Well, I suppose they are, but I think in a way the media are to blame. We're to blame for this because we build it up so much, don't we, into this sort of take it or leave it kind of
all
series,
or nothing.
All or nothing, exactly. And I suppose that's a fault of our part, really, because we're kind of lifting the Ashes onto a pedestal, which perhaps, well, it may or may not deserve. I mean, it is the oldest rivalry in sport, and certainly the oldest rivalry in cricket. So I suppose in that sense, it has that level of importance. But it's often been said that to just kind of carte blanche and sack everybody when England don't perform well in the Ashes is quite destructive. Look what happens to governments. If you only have a 4 or 5 year term in government, often no progress is made, and then another party comes in and starts again. So it is a problem. I think sometimes you need a bit more continuity, but unfortunately the hype around the Ashes creates this feeling of sort of the pinnacle of the game. And if you don't achieve good things in it, people have to be sacked and start again. It is wrong, I think.
It sounds like you're advocating 20 years of dictatorship there, Yoz.
Well, yeah, I'm probably not, but I mean, it is quite disruptive, isn't it? Changing the leadership all the time. I mean, I suppose coaches and captains, a bit like school teachers, have a sort of sell-by date. 4 years, 5 year terms seem to, players do get a bit tired of the same sort of philosophies, and they like to hear something new. And it's funny how when a new coach comes in or a new school teacher, everyone's lifted up and sort of galvanised. Anyway, I mean, I think it's pretty destructive to just sack everybody if you don't perform well in the Ashes. And so I hope it doesn't happen.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is that a lot was geared towards the Ashes, and of course they haven't been lost yet, but we feel they probably will be. So a lot was invested in the Ashes, and kind of like part of the, if you like, for want of a better term, the Bazball project. Is that fair? And it was all geared towards this, and it's all gone to ruins in a couple of Test matches, a couple of 8-wicket hammering. So if everything was geared towards that, could Bazball, for want of a better term, be deemed to have failed? Therefore, you have to move away from it. That's one point. The other point, though, is that Brendan McCullum has got a contract until 2027. Yeah. He's also, not long ago, been made white ball coach. Fair to say that hasn't gone well so far, but England do have a World Cup, a T20 World Cup coming up in the new year, in February and March. So what do you do there? Do you say, well, get rid of him from the Test team and he just becomes white ball coach? I mean, that feels unsatisfactory. I mean, look, if it all goes horribly wrong here and England are routed and they get hammered in every single game and they lose 5-0, then perhaps you feel that someone's position does become untenable. But the way that Brendan sees things and kind of wants his team to play, and the team they brought together here has been really, it's been more than unpicked in the first 2 games, hasn't it? Someone's sort of got like a knife and sort of cut through the rigging, if you like. So let's wait and see. But we know that the Ashes are often watershed moments. But so therefore, if the coach goes, does the captain go as well? Because they seem quite aligned. So there are lots of difficult decisions. People might say Rob Key's position, is under scrutiny as well. He's the one that's done the planning for this. He's the head man, and it may well be that he feels that he has had enough. That it is the end for him. If England do get hammered, it's not over yet. It's worth just emphasising that point. It's unlikely that England are going to come back. And the other thing as well, you might say, there's another Ashes series.
Yeah, not long away.
Too distant future, at home. So not next summer.
And an Ashes Test match in Melbourne as well.
That's right. Actually, you're right. They play an Ashes. They play a
one-off
celebratory game in Melbourne in March 2027, before Australia come to England for the Ashes. So
that's in 14 months' time.
Yeah. So, and the other point to make as well, Australia have not won in England for nearly a quarter of a century.
That's right.
I mean, they've won Test matches and they've been competitive. I think that's the point. England just haven't been competitive. They've lost a whole heap of games since 2011. They've not been competitive. They barely got close to Australia in any game, really. There was one game in Melbourne where they were ahead on first innings, and if they bowled really well, or Australia had crumbled in the second innings, they would have won it when Alistair Cook made a double hundred. But they've not been close to them. But at least Australia, when they come to the UK, have been competitive. I mean, the last 2 series have been drawn 2-2, for example. So, and those have been excellent series because they have been competitive, and that's what the matches here have lacked.
And just to be fair to McCullum and Stokes and their regime, Rob Key. One of the missions was to make Test cricket more entertaining, and obviously, people are a little bit scornful about that because, in fact, I did a dinner about 6 months ago at Lord's in the long room of about 200 people, and we had Mike Atherton, Alistair Cook, and Alex Stewart, I think, as the pundits. And one of the questions I asked the audience was, Bazball, do you want to win or do you want to be entertained? One or the other. I mean, it's probably not, it shouldn't be as cut and dried as that, really, but anyway. And most people said, we want to win. There was an overwhelming majority of people who said, put their hand up, we'd rather win than be entertained. But they have, lifted the profile of Test cricket and actually energised the game around the world as well. Other countries have sort of enjoyed playing against England. The crowds in England are very good for Test cricket, even though England don't win every game. So, I mean, they have had a good impact, but this is, I suppose, another level of detail that perhaps they haven't yet crossed off in terms of how do you win the Ashes away. It's hard. Perhaps they've underestimated it a bit. I mean, I think that what they've tried to do here is take away the emotion and intensity that you inevitably feel in an Ashes Test match, in an Ashes series, and try and kind of play that down. And this is why they're doing the golf and the trip to Noosa. We'll talk about that in a minute. Things like that. I think they tried to pare down, sort of reduce the pressure on the players so that they can play what they call their natural game. Unfortunately, I think that has almost gone too far. And, there's no doubt that, and I didn't play Test cricket, but I played in big one-day finals where there was pressure. And, you have to be aware of the pressure. It's no good just saying, it doesn't matter what happens here. It's just another game. You can't do that in those big moments. You have to kind of lock into the fact that it is, a lot of people care about this and it matters. So you have to sort of be conscious of that, but not be overawed by it. And it's quite a careful balance to find that sort of sweet spot between not being too nervous and intimidated, but also being keyed up and being alert as well. I think it's a bit like driving a car, I mean, drive a car, you're sort of trying to be relaxed when you're driving a car, but you also need to be alert in case a dog runs out in front of you. And that actually brings me on to a question here from Graham Allen, who says, as ever, your podcast is passionate and informative. Question is, do the England team still use a psychologist? I was wondering about a challenge to group think, i.e. someone to give an alternative view to players. He mentions Mike Brealey as a potential suggestion there. They do use a sports psychologist, a guy called Gilbert Enoka, who was a bit of a guru with the All Blacks in rugby, of course. He's a sort of performance psychologist in both business and sport. And he was with the team in Perth before the first test. Well, that went well. But I'm sure he had influence and he had some things to say. He hasn't been with the team here in Brisbane, and there are no plans to re-engage him. Maybe his words fell on deaf ears, but from hearing what the players thought, they did find his input valuable. But maybe they just weren't able to implement it.
Yeah. Also, as well, there's a difference between using a psychologist and groupthink as well. They're different things, aren't they? Psychologists can help players individually deal with their game. I mean, groupthink is something that has been sort of level at this team. Everyone thinks the same. You've got to buy into it, and you've got to go the same way. And there's a feeling, I think, in all sorts of walks of life, in business, for example, that you need someone to challenge the orthodoxy. And I think there's a feeling that there hasn't been that orthodoxy challenged by the players. They've all been asked to buy into it, and they've sort of gone with it, haven't they, for the last 2 or 3 years? It's a way, it's being positive, for example, not saying anything negative in the dressing room, and that's why it was really interesting what Ben Stokes said last night when he talked about potentially weak mentality in the team, because we've not heard anything like that before. No one has broken ranks like that. None of the players have they, and said anything like that before. It's always like trying to be positive. Marcus Trescothick was tried to be positive the night before. Ben Stokes kind of said, right, I don't want, we can't have weak players in our team. You can't do well in Australia with weak players. So it feels as though there was a completely, thus far and no further, things have got to change.
A drawing of the line.
Yeah, it felt like
the line in the sand,
didn't it? It felt like it last night. So that group thing that people feel is out there, this idea that the team is a bit of a cult. We might see some kind of, not exactly a reverse ferret, but a different way of playing, perhaps what people might consider to be a smarter way of playing in the third Test match. But the problem is it's 2-0 already.
Yeah.
I mean, just going back to that conversation about entertainment versus winning. I mean, the ideal, of course, is both, isn't it? And that great Australian side that Shane Warne and Steve Waugh and Matthew Hayden, all those people were part of, they did both, didn't they? They entertained and they won. And there was a period at the start of the Brendan McCullum, Ben Stokes axis where England were entertaining and they were winning. And it is worth bearing in mind, for some context, that England won one match in 17 when they took over. So things did change. But ultimately they were building towards this. And I think when it comes to the Ashes, people just want to win, don't they? They want to, if you can entertain as well. So yesterday, that partnership between Ben Stokes and Will Jacks, if they'd scored at 2 and over for 2 days and England had drawn that match and they'd got away with it, and big if they batted for 2 days and they'd drawn the game, everyone would have been saying it was the great escape, wouldn't they? They were saying it's absolutely incredible. The Australians on their knees, England 396 for 6 off 210 overs. It would have been, people would have seen that as fantastic. So, and that's the mentality, of course, that I think English cricket fans take into the Ashes. They want to win, and everyone knows that. It's obvious, you want to win, but it's that above anything else.
Okay, well, let's a couple of other questions or comments here. Lovely to hear, by the way, on our YouTube comments from the dear old Henry. My dear old thing, he says, what a fantastic YouTube video from Henry Blowers. Blowers, thank you very much for responding. I hope you're well in Menorca or wherever you're hanging out at the moment. I know you do your own podcast as well, so we'll give you a bit of a plug when you next bring out your own podcast. Thank you very much. Let's do the Betfair Exchange, shall we? Because there's been an interesting comment. I mentioned about England going up to Noosa. They're having what they're terming a mid-series break. Some people have said they're going on holiday to Noosa, which is a surfing area in the north of Queensland, or north of Brisbane anyway, a lovely sort of beach area. But the players are saying, or the management are saying, it's a mid-series break. I'm doing a mid-series break as well. I'm going to New Zealand. But anyway, what about...
you should be sacked as well then.
Yeah, I should be
sacked from your own podcast.
So what was the comment there?
Well, from Joseph Donovan, here is my solution. No lounging by the poolside, no golf, no Marmite, and no conjugal visits. Get the players sweating and hungry for a win. I think the break, it doesn't sit very well with the England supporters, those perhaps out here and those in the UK. Well, you can't speak for all of them because there will be people who kind of understand, why it's happened. There is this 8-day gap between the second and the third Test match. I think the problem was there was such a massive gap between the first and the second Test match, wasn't there? It was like unscheduled because those 3 days were knocked off. Look, England have been working, if you like, for the last 9 days. 9 days in a row. They had 5 practice days, hence Brendan McCullum's comment about overtraining, if anything. And I think the point about that is that it's probably something they thought but shouldn't have said, because it just riles people up. Okay, so they've been working for 5 days, before leading into the Test match, and then they've played 4 more days. So that's 9 days of work, actually in a pretty stressful environment. It's pretty stressful playing at the Gabba. It's stressful playing badly. It's stressful getting the abuse from the crowd for 4 days. You think of someone like Jamie Smith. So you can't just be at it the whole time. Yeah. And also the other thing as well you can't do is just suddenly institute a practice match against a local team or whatever, because it just, those things take a lot of organising. So they are going to go to Adelaide on Saturday, and then they're going to train on Sunday, Monday and Tuesday, 3 days, which is normal in preparation for the next Test match. So therefore that's the context around going to Noosa.
Yeah, and I like the idea actually, because I'm not a great believer in endless practice. I think practice should be, intense and purposeful, but you don't want to just practice and practice. I mean, if you talk to a lot of athletes, and when they're building to the Olympics, for instance, they do all the work, months and months ahead, and by the time it gets to the actual Olympics themselves, they taper off their training, don't they, and actually have days of rest and things before the event itself. And actually, I think what I would like England to do is go to Noosa, do some surfing, good for the body, good for the soul, good to clear the head of all the things that have happened. But also, I want them to sit around and talk about that game and where they got things wrong, and just to reflect on it. They don't have to look at videos. They can just sort of think about it and talk about the match situations they were in and just analyse them a bit and say, well, if you had done this, it might have led to such and such, and just talk about a few scenarios. They don't have to go and practice them, but just, I think a lot more communication, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts. Maybe that's what they will do. I think that will be really beneficial. And then start to put those sort of things into practice in the 2 or 3 days in the lead up to the Test match. I think that's fine.
Yeah, and the point is, of course, is it's the Ashes. It's intense, and it's going to get even more intense once they get back from that break in Noosa, because they've got 3 back-to-back Test matches. There's a bit of a gap between the third Test and the Boxing Day Test, and then there's a bit of a gap in the New Year Test, and then it's done. So it's going to ramp up even more, isn't it? So if you're like going at it the whole time, then your head's going to be overloaded, your body's probably going to be overloaded as well. I think probably the issue is kind of what's gone on before, isn't it, really, and the preparation. Brendan McCullum, they won't have it at the moment. The preparation was right. It's the kind of preparation that we need. We've been used to actually for series. It doesn't feel as though it's been right. I think one of the problems in the preparation is, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to prepare properly for a pink ball Test match. I just think it is a bit different. I think England just don't play much pink ball cricket, and they didn't go to Canberra. I mean, even Canberra, you could argue, wasn't particularly good preparation. I was down there. It was cold. The attack was it was okay. It was willing. It was keen, but it wasn't kind of like, it wasn't like playing a state team or something like that who were at you with the pink ball. We talked on previous podcasts what they could have done in terms of, I don't know, in the build up, could have played Friday, Saturday, could have batted Friday, say, and then sent the players up the batters up on a Saturday, let the bowlers bowl on the Friday, on the Saturday.
I mean, it's interesting looking back at. I know it was a different period of Test cricket, 15 years ago. But when the Strauss team won 2010-11, they did play their 3 sort of proper warm-up games against state sides and played, serious cricket. And quite a lot of the batters, if not all of them, made hundreds. And they got into some rhythm. But the bowlers were sent to Brisbane early to get ready for the climate and the heat and the bounce of the pitch and so on. So they actually divided the squad, and that was quite clever, I thought.
That's what they could have done with Canberra. That's my point.
It's harder to do that now, isn't it? Because everything is so congested. Players coming straight from that New Zealand one-day series. It was harder to schedule matches against state teams. I don't think they perhaps tried hard enough to have a practice match at the Wacker, which is what India did. Because, talking to John Stevenson, the chief executive of the Wacker, a couple of days after the test, he did say, well, the communication from England was a bit vague, and, there was no forceful, right, we want to play at the Wacker a week before the test. And so in the end, they scheduled a Shield match, probably quite cannily, before England could get in, or suddenly realise that they needed one. So, there is a little bit of a flaw in the planning there, but it is much harder to do now.
Yeah, the ideal, it seems to me, before the first Test match would have been to play a proper game at the Wacker against decent opposition, whether it's the Lions or whether it's a WA team. You think playing against an Australian team would have been a better option, wouldn't it? Yeah. And the ideal thing before this Test match would have been to play a 3-day pink ball game. That would mean kind of, I suppose, getting here a bit earlier and the schedule being a bit more elongated, because everything is condensed now. It's not like the tours of the past, which would last for 4 months and you'd play all these state teams and you'd go up country and play a one-day match. It's just not like that anymore. There aren't that many gaps in the schedule to play. Although, perversely, on this trip,
big gaps.
Well, because they lost quickly in Perth and they've got extra day here. There are some gaps to play. So that's where we are, really. So I think it's not so much the preparation for the next game. It's the preparation for the first 2 games that hasn't.
And you need to start well, don't you? And if you don't, everything comes on top of you, and all that kind of examination of what came before is microscopically analysed. Listen, we'll take a break anyway, and afterwards we'll talk about possible changes that England might make for the next test at the Adelaide Oval.
Okay, thanks very much for all your comments. Let's have a look at a few more here. Planet of the Deaf on YouTube said, I was baffled before the series at how confident so many of the English pundits were.
Including me.
Well, what did you say?
I said 3-2.
To England?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did I say?
You said 3-1 Australia.
Actually looking a bit conservative at the moment, isn't it? When we did our pre-series podcast, I said at the time I thought we could see 3 different scenarios, and one of them was this kind of unravelling that's happened, because I'd seen it here before. No, there's still a possibility it could be 3-1, but England obviously going to have to get their act together. What about that pre-series optimism from English pundits?
Well, the thing is, England had allegedly planned for this by getting the fastest attack England had ever fielded. They also had some crackerjack batters as well, Harry Brook, obviously Joe Root.
Stable top 7. I mean, it's been the same top 7 for a year and a half. Yeah.
It was a sort of, the coming man as wicketkeeper batsman, had played some brilliant innings. So I think there was a lot of reasonable optimism. What I think probably we did perhaps underestimate was Australia's ability to take wickets with not their frontline attack. We didn't even know, did we, when we were predicting the outcome, that Pat Cummins wouldn't necessarily make the first test or the second test. We didn't know that Hazelwood wasn't going to make it either. Initially, there was rumours about Cummins, but we thought Hazelwood would play. And I still said I thought England could win, but I think
no Lyon for the second test as well.
Yeah, but I think what has been quite interesting to me is seeing how these pitches and the Kookaburra ball have done a little bit for a sort of old-fashioned type seamer.
But did we not know that? Haven't we been told that a little bit?
We did know that. But I suppose you thought that, therefore, if you had faster bowlers, they'd make it happen quicker. But you need that control. And I mean, it was really instructive watching Michael Noosa bowl with the brilliant Alex Carey up to the stumps, totally undermining England's methods of standing out of their crease, which is something they all do, isn't it? Against almost the faster bowler that there is, the more they stand out of their crease and try and hit it on the up. And this was more old-fashioned Bradford League cricket with a gnarled old medium pace. Well, Michael Noosa is a bit quicker than that. Bowling line and length, on-off stump, and keeper stood up to the stumps, keeping the batsmen back in their crease, and England found it difficult to deal with on a pitch which was just holding and moving a tiny bit. Very good old-fashioned cricket from Australia, total cricket, which England, this new sort of fangled England couldn't deal with, which caused one of our correspondents to call it Baz Balls Up.
The other point as well is who's the leading wicket taker in the series. It is Mitchell Starc, who is a quick bowler, isn't it? So there we go. There's just the quality of Starc and the pace of Starc has unsettled England as well. Certainly did it at Perth. Although you feel, a lot of those wickets feel
sucker punches. Really.
Gifted to him.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them have been pretty straightforward.
Here's a full ball outside off.
Yeah.
Have a drive, and you might get an edge.
Yeah. I'd like to turn to Ben Stokes' comments last night, because it has been commented on by you about kind of being quite critical of the team. About I don't want weak men in my dressing room. There's no room for weak men in my dressing room. There's no room for weak men playing a test series in Australia. Bigus says, is the high priest of Bazball losing his religion? Is it time to stage an interaction? Is it time to stage an intervention? Mike Ellis says, it's easy to publicly criticise your team and make veiled threats. That's not how you identify and rectify your problems. And Victor Trumper, not the real one, because he died a long time ago. All well and good turning on your players, but the setup and philosophy is the underlying issue. What do you make of some of those comments?
Well, I thought Stokes, I was in his press conference and we put some of it on our video yesterday and our podcast. I thought he spoke passionately and with great feeling and common sense. It's all very well saying to players, you must get stuck in here, you must be more mentally tough. But actually, to show his disappointment, and especially as the way he batted. I mean, he batted absolutely superbly, totally committed. And the way he speaks is actually, it's not too passionate. It's quite kind of calculated, but very clear. I mean, he says they lack clarity, really, in their head. And I don't have a problem with him saying that publicly at all. Do you?
No, I think that the interesting thing is that he said it at all, because it's the first time, as I was mentioning earlier, that we've heard that sort of
I suppose it shows how exasperated he is by the situation.
Yeah, it's that sort of strength of implied criticism. Of course, he didn't name names. We can all make our own guesses about which players and which situations those players were in that he was referring to. They were all, I think, pretty obvious in that last Test match, and we talked about it yesterday on our post-game podcast. But I think that was the surprise, that he actually said it in the first place. Sometimes captains kind of use the media to get their message across to their players, don't they?
Which is probably what he was doing.
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
Thus far and no further. Whether you can turn it round, I don't know. From that situation that you're in such a sort of low ebb. Can you really lift yourselves up and get the best out of people?
I mean, to be fair, he also blamed himself. By the way, he said it was me and Bryden Cast that let the Aussies off the hook after a good opening spell from Jofra Archer and Gus Atkinson. We just couldn't nail 4, 5, 6 balls and over on a length, and we let the Aussies get away. And he shouldered the blame for that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's going to be one of the really fascinating aspects of Adelaide, and the conversations that Ben Stokes has promised to have with his players, presumably at Noosa, between bouts of relaxation.
Or just as they've done their belly roll on the surfboard and piled into the sand. So do you think they'll make any changes? I mean, there are one or two people making suggestions here about whether England should change personnel.
Yeah, well, Jonathan Pyle says we might as well start looking towards next summer and which players need to be brought in to stabilise this awful Test side. I don't think they are an awful Test side. They're not an awful team at all. Look, who could they bring in? Well, the Lions have just played a game against Australia A. They've lost by an innings and plenty. Australia made 500 and odd, and the Lions were rolled out for 160, and they made a better effort of it in the second innings. Jacob Bethel made 71. Asa Tribe, who I saw play in Canberra last weekend, and he batted well there. He looked to have time. I think you want to see a player over. I haven't seen enough of him to comment, but what I saw from that first effort down in Canberra, the first time I'd seen him, I thought he looked impressive. He looked to have a bit of time to play, and he's come up with 100. So, as Jeffrey always says, people remember hundreds. So I'm not saying that he comes into the team, but the Lions are here. I mean, there is an option to say don't go home, one or two players, but I mean the most likely one is Jacob Bethel somehow to fit into the team.
Yeah, I think
but he's not made a first class 100.
No, he hasn't. I mean, it's so difficult, isn't it? I've always liked Jacob Bethel as a player. I thought he played brilliantly in New Zealand when he made his debut, and since then they've rather mismanaged his whole summer, really. The trouble with Ollie Pope is, and he would be the fall guy, is that he's averaging 18.71 against Australia in 7 Test matches, 14 innings, highest score 46, no 50s in 7 Tests against Australia, coming in at number 3, looking increasingly skittish. He did make 46 in the first innings in Perth, but then got out for a duck in the second innings, and just generally he puts everyone on edge.
He doesn't give you a sense of permanence, does he?
He doesn't give you a sense of permanence. And Bethel has a very calm technique. Obviously, he doesn't have a track record as yet, but you can just see the skill and ability, and I think also the nous. That is something England are lacking in the middle order, apart from Joe Root, obviously.
Yeah, Jonathan, I mean, I don't think, Jonathan, who made the observation about it, we might as well plan for next summer. The Ashes are not lost yet.
No, sure.
It's 2-0 with 3 to play. The arithmetic is in their favour, not much else is, as we said yesterday. So I think, see how things go in Adelaide before you rip up everything.
Okay.
But there obviously are positions that probably should be under threat actually, but aren't necessarily, because they don't have the players here to replace them.
I mean, my friend Colin Cook, I stayed with in southwest Australia. He came up with the idea. He loves Jacob Bethel. He's seen something in him, and he was a former county cricketer, so he knows how to spot a player. He's done a lot of coaching in Australia, and he said Bethel at 3, Pope goes down to 7 and keeps wicket, because Jamie Smith looks shot to bits, was his view. I mean, I suppose you do need a proper keeper though, and Pope is a sort of stand-in keeper, and Jamie Smith is a more regulation keeper. Some of our correspondents saying go back to Ben Folkes.
Well, that's not going to happen before Adelaide, is it?
No, obviously not.
No. So, I mean, look, who knows what could happen in the future. I mean, we know with Ashes series that things get ripped up afterwards, and then players who perhaps have been out of favour, have an opportunity. I mean, some people saying they should bring in Dom Sibley.
Yes, and the Vicar of Sibley.
Yeah,
and Baby Boycott.
Yeah, Hamid. At Nottinghamshire, he's had a very good season, but I remember him being here. He was on the last tour, and he had a really, really difficult time of it. In the end, he just couldn't play. You had to take him out of the side. Well, he's kind of rebuilt his game, and he's had an excellent season with Nottinghamshire. One thing I would say about Hamid in the future is he's the sort of player that you think about Tour of India. I would take him on a Tour of India in the future. Sometimes you think about horses for courses. Australia did it here with Michael Noosa. So if you're going to that part of the world, take someone like Hamid, because he's a very good player of spin. We saw that on his very first India tour.
Robin Learmont here has given quite a long suggestion. He says, knowing that Stark and co were going to concentrate on bowling outswingers to the right-handers, i.e. angling across them, why the hell did Pope, Brooke and Crawley and even Duckett not move their feet to the pitch of the ball? People complain about Steve Smith being a fidget at the wicket, but look at the historical stupendous record. In fact, Duckett, I thought, got a really good ball from Stark in the first innings. Very good first ball he'd received.
And he got an impossible ball in the second innings, didn't he, as well?
He did. He was unlucky. I mean, there's nothing he could have done about that ball in the first innings or the second innings, really. If you get a ball under Ben Duckett's bat, it has kept low. But I think the point he makes about Steve Smith is quite an interesting one from a technical point of view. What Steve Smith does, especially if he recognises a bowler as trying to move it away from a right-hander, is he actually gets so far across that his leg is outside the line of the off stump and outside the line of his back leg. His back leg is outside the line of the off stump. I mean, I'll go back here and sort of demonstrate. His back leg is so far outside the line of the off stump that he can use it as a second line of defence. If he plays and edges the ball with the bat inside the line of the right leg and he edges it, it hits the leg rather than going to slip, which is a remarkable bit of technique. And it's a little bit like what Bradman used to do, funnily enough. I mean, Bradman used to get right outside off stump. In those days, the LBW law was different. And you couldn't be out LBW if the ball pitched outside off stump, so he used his pad as a second line of defence. Smith does that a little bit as well. It looks ugly, but it works. I think that is a problem. England do not move their feet. I mean, I'm not one of those people who thinks you should tread on the ball and get your head and everything, going miles outside off stump. But the weight transfer into the line of the ball outside off stump isn't right.
Yeah. We understand, I think, the anger that's out there, the frustration that's out there, because I think we feel it ourselves, not the anger, but we understand the frustration, because I think we all came here hoping for a competitive series. I think that's what I did. I was hoping that it would be different in that it would be competitive. I thought Australia would win, but I thought there was a good chance it would be competitive. We haven't had that, and it's been with a whimper. But there have been a few comments along this line from Stealth Packfer, who says they haven't baz-balled enough. The media pressure has made them go into their shell. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think they did give it a go in Perth. I mean, all sorts of shots are being played. Okay, you could argue yesterday, Ben Stokes and Will Jacks put it away. I don't know whether that was just kind of like a bloody mindedness or whatever, but just bat and see what happens, do what Australia did, copy what Australia had done the day before. I wouldn't say they haven't baz-balled enough out here. If you want to use that kind of shorthand, that's not always that helpful, but they have attacked quite a lot, haven't they? And there have been a lot of wickets that have gone down as a result. Lots of players caught on the boundary, lots of players caught on the up.
And giving away those tail end wickets is something they do need to really think about, because you look at the way Australia batted in their first innings at the Gabba. They from 1 to 11 they got into double figures, they hung around, they batted time, they tired the bowlers out. It was a long-term strategy. England's solution to just hook and pull, with abandon lower down the order. You can't just blame the tail enders, obviously, but they could apply a bit more sense and caution to their batting and make it harder to dismiss them, because funnily enough, at the Adelaide Oval, the square boundaries are short, so they probably won't go to the bouncer tactics there, because a miss hit goes for 6. Yeah. So it might be something that only happens again in Melbourne, but they've got to kind of commit and stay in a bit longer. It's a 5-day game, for God's sake.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point about Adelaide, isn't it? A lot of the shots that England have played into the leg side would carry for 6 at the Adelaide Oval. So Australia might have to rethink, but look, they will rethink, because they're canny, aren't they? They're not just going to bomb them and just get hit into the crowd at deep back with square leg continuously. I wouldn't think, anyway.
And they are canny, and it's funny, but Steve Smith obviously won't be captain anymore, but he's an amazing cricketer. I mean, that catch he took to get rid of Jacks at slip, brilliant catch, diving left-handed. He's now level with Rahul Dravid, isn't he? A slip catching in Test history. Only Joe Root is ahead. And Smith just grabs those ones from nowhere. It's amazing. I shook hands with him after the game. I just said, mate, well played. I've had a few chats with him in the past. He grabbed my hand and he almost completely crushed it. I thought, wow, you've been A, training, and B, you've got hands like buckets. Big advantage.
Is he overtrained?
Well, he has actually done a lot. Well, he came straight from New York to play a first Shield match, didn't he? He's now partly resident in New York.
Yeah, and he's also saying, I only need a couple of hits.
Yeah.
So, there we go. You talk about practice. Everyone says, I need loads of practice. He said, I needed a couple of hits, which is what he had, and he got some runs. And in this Test series, he's not actually had a dramatic impact, because he hasn't needed to so far, but he has got some runs. He got some very useful runs in the first innings of this game. Of course, he finished it off in the grand manner. There's nothing like finishing the game off with a 6 to really sort of rubber stamp it, is it, over a deep backwards square leg. We've probably overstayed our welcome. Thanks for all your comments. Yeah, look, we're not in tears. We're not in tears.
Well, you are. You're in tears because I'm always late. But I've tried very hard. I'll make a New Year's resolution.
Okay.
All right. You've got 2 more weeks to survive, and then I'll New Year's resolution. I'll turn up only 10 minutes late instead of 20. All right.
Yeah. Hold on. New Year until 1st of January. So
Well, it's 2 weeks
we're
to
nearly
go.
all the way through the test series by then. We only have 1 test to go.
I'll turn up on time
Right.
on the 2nd of January when we do our preview of the Sydney Test match, when it's 2-2 with 1 to play.
Excellent. Okay, well, the next game is on Tuesday. It's night time. It's actually Wednesday here, but it's on Tuesday. The action starts at 11:30 in the evening. You can catch it on TNT Sports, and as you know, I'll be there on Test Match Special as well, bringing you ball-by-ball commentary. So loads of ways to access what is going to be another crucial game for England, but I mean, it does feel, as I'm sure you will sense yourself, it does feel it's slipping away.
But just to keep your optimism up, I'm going to put out a few podcasts over the next week. A couple of those episodes of the Greatest Ashes 2005. Look out for those. You may have watched them already, but I'll repost them. And also, I've got an interview with Graham Swan actually, in our Ashes Heroes series, talking about the Adelaide Test match of 2010. So look out for those over the next couple of days or so. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye for now.